Everybody has regrets in life. If you couldn't possibly go through life with no regrets.
I don't have regrets because what we did, it was the right thing at that time.
The two things in my life that are the most important and have been my rule of thumb is smile and sense of humor. For me, that's how you get through.
One regret, one time.
What's a regret that you've learned an important lesson from?
My biggest regret is that I did not complete university, and get a degree. It's always sort of bothered me. Of course, when I finished high school, and I did pretty well, my parents couldn't afford to send me into university, and there weren't the same programs available, scholarships and that kind of thing. I did win a scholarship in high school for $200, but I just turned it down because it wasn't very helpful in terms of going to university. So that's what I enlisted in the Army, and I was there for 28 years. But whenever I was stationed in one place long enough, I went to university. Like when I was in Ottawa, I went to Carleton and earned some credits. And then the University of Manitoba started a program by correspondence, so I got a few more credits there. I ended up with 3 years of university, but I never had the opportunity to finish it because I was away too much and that kind of thing. So it just always sort of bugged me a bit.
I have lots of regrets. I mean, I'm sorry in the way that I wasn't the kind of daughter I think I should have been. I regret the fact that I had 3 boys, but the middle one was adopted, and he died young. Everybody has regrets in life. If you couldn't possibly go through life with no regrets.
When we used to make decisions, my wife and I, it was the right thing at that time. So how can I say now, in 2024, thinking back and put that decision in 2024 thinking? Impossible. I don't have regrets because what we did, it was the right thing at that time. You have regrets, what can you do about it? It's not going to make anything better, make things worse. You just sit there and worry about your regrets.
I've been married twice, and my first husband had a severe breakdown, and we ended up separating because of the raising the children. It was amiable, and it was regretful because it was through my son's teenage years that they were very close. We were all very close, but I regretted that his illness was something that couldn't be, that it came upon it. We were not separated as a couple per se. It was because, for me, he was undermining by omission, raising the children. I regret that came upon, because our marriage was fine, except what his illness meant in terms of change of plans, change of pace, change of attitude. It was hard on the boys, but we got through it. But I regretted that had to happen. Who wouldn't, I'm always really, really glad in the teaching when the kids get it. It makes you feel good. Oh, you still don't get it, do you? I have to do it. Sometimes I regret the effort. The two things in my life that are the most important and have been my rule of thumb is smile and sense of humor. I smile at everybody. I'm a risk taker. And for me, that's how you get through.
What's the biggest risk you took in your life?
Getting married, maybe. I don't know.
Which time?
That was a huge change of life, and I lived for 25 years on my own, became a principal, have my superintendent's papers, which I never used, of course. I can't speak to one in particular, one regret, one moment. When it meant major change, that means I'm going to have to do something that's I don't want to do, or I don't feel like doing, but I have to do, and I will do it. And I get really, regret isn't the right word, but I get upset when people don't keep promises. For instance, you promised me the notes from the meeting for me to take next week to the whatever, and you don't give them to me, and you don't phone me to tell me that you won't be able to give them to me. I find that offensive and upsetting, and I'm regretful. The other thing I regret is how many people don't realize the glass really is half full. People who are so suspicious. It never occurs to me that the person might have negative intentions. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. I just see people and I go for it. And then they say, well, didn't you know? And I said, I didn't need to know that. I was, Or here I had thought they were going to be helpful and reliable, and they aren't. And I regret the loss of my expectation.
One regret. One time. I used to work for this guy, and me and the wife weren't getting along together. He having trouble with his wife, and he beat her up. And it's working good. So I didn't beat my wife up, I just slapped her. But I heard her. I regret that right till now. It was awful, because I wouldn't hurt a fly. But I did it with her, and I regret it all the time. I don't regret leaving her, but I regret hitting her so much.
If you went back and talked to younger Lewis, how should he have dealt with that situation with your wife at the time?
I would have took it easy and take my time to get things better, because it would have worked that way. But this guy, the boss, he said he ruined me because I'd never hit anybody. Never. I tried it, and it hurt me even now.
I've had a good life. I had friends, and I stayed home. And I looked after my mother. When my brothers and sisters left home, got married, and we had a good life together. So I couldn't wish for a better life than what I've had. And of course, coming to Dalmanor has helped. I've had a good life here. And I hope I still do.
What's the most important lesson you learned from each of your parents?
They're both from modest backgrounds. When I was a young teenager, I guess, I thought I knew everything. And so my father wasn't very smart, in my view. When I was in my early 20s, I suddenly realized that he became very smart all of a sudden. And I thought about that for a long time. I wonder how that was. And I realized I became a little more mature. And I didn't know so much when I was younger. And he was, he wasn't all that well educated and so on, but he knew life, he understood life, and his advice was always, appreciated and worthwhile listening to. And it was enjoyable to chat with him, And I always regretted looking down when I was so smart, at a young teenager. And I didn't know anything. But it took a while to realize that.
And what about your mom?
Well, she was a wonderful person. My father went overseas in 1940. It was interesting. He was in the militia, reserve army, as a sort of a hobby. When war was declared, his unit in our town was activated for active service. And so everybody was re-interviewed. He was 40 years old and 5 kids at home. So they said, thank you very much, but we don't need you. Look after your family. He didn't think that was right because he was very patriotic. He hitchhiked 100 miles to Montreal to join an infantry unit, the Black Watch of Canada, and he was sent overseas. An infantry soldier at 40 years old. My heavens, that's a 20-year-old game. But once you got to England, and they realized that, he was too old to be a combat soldier. So they made him the camp electrician. So he's served over there for 4 years, just helped, around the base. So my mother was raising 5 kids at home, without my father, and we were brats. So it was a real challenge, but she was wonderful. She did a great job. We all ended up pretty successful, so kudos to her.
What advice do you have for people trying to find meaning and purpose?
Find meaning and purpose in what you do. That's my advice. Because my life was very, very much enlarged and fulfilled by the fact that I had interests that, well, in a way they didn't consume me, in the way that they were so important to me. My life wasn't just tied up within the family nucleus. And that's what I think is unfortunate. I think I have a broad interest, and I think people should have broad interests, not just in their occupation, but even in culture. I mean, my husband and I traveled. We went to the symphony. We went to the ballet. We had broad interests, and I think that's important.
How do people find the thing that they're passionate about, that they can turn into their purpose, that like you found yours and you just went after it? A lot of people struggle to find the thing that they can commit themselves to.
Well, different things appeal to different people. I have a friend who does beautiful quilting. I mean, how did she find that? I don't know. She started sometime and she went. Different people will find different interests, but they'll never find it if they don't venture outside of their nucleus. You read stories of celebrities and others. They say, this happened. I went to the movies and I saw this movie and I realized that that's what I wanted to do. So that's how people find things. But also they may be influenced by their parents or by their best friends. So there's a variety of ways.
What is one thing you believe young people today should focus more on?
I have no idea how young people think these days. So I can't pass on any information to the young people other than pay your credit card before the end of the month. That's the only thing I can pass on to them.
Did you have any other rules that you followed like that?
Just a normal way of bringing up children to do the right things, work hard, study, and just be a good citizen. But the young, to pass on to young people, that's why I didn't want to do all of this stuff, because I have no idea, just the one thing, which is impossible for young people to tear up their credit card. Could you imagine that? But they're going to get themselves in debt. They are getting themselves in debt. They'll never be able to pay their interest. Whenever I go to the bank to pay a bill in the PC account, and they say, "You paying the whole thing?" I says, "Definitely, I don't pay interest." And I say, "You better do the same thing." And the teller looks at me. I says, "You don't pay interest." "Oh, I'm very careful with that." Yeah.
How do you think that happened? The lack of financial understanding from your generation to today's?
The breakdown of the family core was a step in the breakdown of family communications and advice that we used to share to our children around the dinner table. The way of life now is I don't know if there's any family core left anywhere. I don't know. where people where a family sits down in the evening and has a meal and discusses the day. What did we do today? What did you learn today? And things like that.
What is something you wish people appreciated more?
Their contribution. I'm a very strong believer that if you're going to be making decisions, you consult the persons who could be affected by the decision, and therefore appreciate the opportunity to speak out, to be welcomed. If not, you don't win the day, but you have a voice. And I wish more people were respectful of one another's contributions, of the importance of being consulted, and grateful to have them in your life as a friend. Appreciation and gratitude.
What are you most grateful for right now?
That I'm here on time.
You were early. It was great.
What am I grateful for? That I'm here at Del Manor. That I'm as well as I am. I have my hearing. I have my vision. I'm beginning to lose my vocabulary, which as an outgoing speaker for many years in different workshops is a serious loss. I get into the middle of a sentence and can't think of the word that I'm looking for. Before it was automatic. Now, if I can't think of it, I can't hook it. I can't retrieve it unless I'm lucky. So I'm grateful for what I still have in terms of my language skills. And I'm very grateful to have been a teacher because my style of living and career are still with me. I'm grateful that I have two sons who are very helpful with their wives, granddaughters, who one of whom has designed the door on my suite outside door. She's an artist. I'm at a happy time in my life. I lived for 25 years on my own, happily, but I just got bored with the notion of not having a decent meal cooked by somebody else. The big decision that I made was one, it was time to do something about me. And secondly, I would not stay in my condo. I would come to a retirement home. And we did the research. We looked around. My real estate agent and I are good friends. We went and visited a number of different, well, 4 of them actually, here, Amica, etc., and chose this one. I was still in the hospital when the time came for the boys to be involved, and I could just smell them thinking, where are we going to put her next? And I said, you're not going to put me anywhere. I am moving back to my condo. I am researching where I will go next, but you're not putting me. We got that sorted out.
How would you define success? And do you think you've had a successful life?
If you're happily married and you got kids and, you know, you all love each other and you help the kids, that's success to me. Not like I said before, not becoming a millionaire. Like I got 5 kids, very lucky. So I did my job.
What are you most proud of with your kids?
My kids, I'm very proud of them. My 3 boys, I got them to read when they were young. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You ever heard of that book?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they never worked for anybody. One of them is a professional poker player. He made about $13 million, but he lost quite a bit of it. And the other one, he had all kinds of businesses. He had 14 stores all over North America selling drones. Then he had to stop because the big companies got hold of it. They know it was selling, so they bought him off. And the other one, he sells motorcycle parts all over the world. So they work for themselves.
Have you learned any lessons from your kids?
I don't think so. I think they learned it from me.
It's an honest answer. I like it.
Well, I must have learned something from them.
Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self?
I've always been very active, and that's what I would say, be active, be interested in what you're doing, and that's what I've tried to do. be interested in people.
Before we started rolling,
Yes.
you said this is a new experience and you've never done anything like this
Yeah.
before. And I think it just, to your point of be interested and say yes and try new things, here you are at 101 years old,
Yes.
still trying something new.
I can't believe I've made it this far. I've gone through a lot of illness, but I fought it. I've had cancer a couple of times and other little things, but I've got over it and I fought it. And I said, I'm going to live. You pray to God that you're going to.
What is your secret to living a long, fulfilling life?
You have to look after your health. You need to pay attention to and avoid bad habits like smoking or too much alcohol or too much fast food. You need to pay attention to diet, exercise, and I don't think the youth of today is getting enough exercise. We were brought up, you're out in the summertime for sure, you're out on the street playing and, until the sun went down. So we were always fit. But I don't see that today. I see too many overweight youth and not enough physical activity. And I think you have to look after your health starting at a young age, because bad habits, start eroding your health. So you need regular checkups as well. It's important.
What is one thing you believe young people today should focus more on?
They should focus more on peace and on democracy. I think the world is in a very worrisome place right now.
What can people do? I think a lot of people feel hopeless and like, I can't do anything. I don't have a voice. What do you recommend people do?
Well, some people have a voice, and more people should have a voice. The politicians will only respond to tremendous amount of pressure. They do make some changes here. In the last few years, as imperfect as they may be, we have a child care. We have the beginning of pharmacare and dental care. So those are not in response to Trudeau's good wishes. They're in response to the pressure from lots and lots of people.
Have you learned anything from your kids?
I guess I've learned that whatever we did to bring up these children had a positive effect on them. And that's nice to know. I don't want to learn anymore. For one thing.
Okay.
I don't want to learn anymore.
You talked about your parents. What's the biggest lesson that you learned from your dad, since you talked about your mom?
Well, he didn't get to have a lot of opinion. So he tried to emulate her when she wasn't around, but he didn't know how it worked. So it's sad. I didn't have a lot of respect for my father, because completely without any ability to change it, he really didn't have any voice in the family, because she was very busy doing it. I love my dad, but he was from Scotland, and he and my mother should never have been married in terms of their attitude and their, as I say, he was more timid, she was bold. He would speak up and she'd override him. But we all got along, we survived, and my brother died at 50. No, I just think a healthy respect for one another, the ability to be open-minded, to listen very much and to hear, to be willing to share, to keep promises. These are things that are important behaviors, whether I'm with my students, whether I'm with my family, with my friends, with my athletic opponents. Be open-minded. Its glass is half full. In fact, it's 3/4 full.
If someone watching is struggling to figure out how to go chase their career and ambition, but also be nice, and they think they're two different things. Like in order to get ahead, you have to be mean, you have to step on
Well,
people.
you have to work hard in your life. That's the only way you're going to survive. But some people work hard and they still starve. Like I was watching a movie yesterday about this guy that went to space, Mexican guy. He was, they were coming to the States from Mexico, the whole family, picking corn and stuff like that. They were getting paid next to nothing. And his dream was to go to the space after he grew to a certain age. And he ended up doing that. He tried to about 31 times, and he wasn't allowed. Then he went there in person, and he got in. And that's a dream. You get something that you really like.
What advice would you have for young people who are trying to find fulfillment and happiness?
I would say, keep moving. This is what I tell them. Keep moving. Enjoy it. Enjoy what's around you. Because everything here to make you happy, to do things. This is why they have exercise, to keep you moving. And that's what I keep saying. Just keep moving.
I love how you have a very positive and optimistic view on life.
During the war years, one brother was overseas for 4 years. My other two brothers were around Canada. But through those years, I worked assembling binoculars and then shift work. So it's been a good life, I can't complain.
Do you think everybody would benefit from military service?
Not everybody, because I think there's people who, they're pacifists and, don't believe in war. But I tell you, the strongest pacifists are soldiers. Once they know what's going on, they don't believe in war either. They'll do their duty, of course. It's a terrible, terrible way to solve international problems. But, the world is not in a very good place right now. And there's always that threat. But, so I think, unfortunately, countries need defense forces.
I think even just the structure and the discipline and the education.
At one point, I commanded the Canadian Forces Recruit School, which meant that every single Anglophone recruit across the country came to the recruit school for their first 12 weeks of training. And it's really convert them from civilians to basic service people. And at graduation, we'd always have a reception. The parents would be there, and a nice parade and all that. And I've had so many parents say, it's a miracle what you've done for our daughter or my son. Yeah. They're polite, and they make the bed, they tidy up. They're wonderful adults.
What's the key to getting young people to follow you?
You mean in a stressful situation, or?
Well, just in general. I mean, you're taking people. That's a difficult transition from civilian life and their, old habits and ways of thinking to now being in the military, be part of a machine. How do you get people to follow you, to agree with your way of seeing things, to do what you say they should do?
First, they have to have an understanding of what their role is and what your role is as their leader, and treat them with respect, firmly when necessary, but the discipline and the routine, and teamwork, they all become very proud of being part of a unit.
How do you get people from all sorts of different backgrounds, religions, cultures to then function well as a team?
Well, that sometimes is a challenge. I had the first group of indigenous recruits come to me at the recruit school from up north. And it was a challenge for them because the environment was different. You know, you have experienced trainers and they know how to handle these people, and they did a great job. The idea of sending these Inuit down to us was to make them service people, and then they would go back north, would be posted and stationed up north. None of them want to go back north. In a sense, the experiment backfired because they all wanted to stay, you know, in southern Canada. So, and some did, you know. They molded in very well.
What made you want to join the military?
Well, I'm not really sure. I knew my grandfather was in the British Army for a while, and then when he came to Canada, he joined up the Canadian Army. He was in World War I. My father was overseas as a soldier, and I had uncles, and well, of course, it was wartime, so that's not surprising. But I suppose that influenced it, and the fact that university was not on the cards for me. So I had no regrets about that. I served for 28 years.
That's great. Thank you. If somebody's just at the beginning of their career, they just graduated, you know, university, and they're starting off, what do you think they should focus on?
Well, you've got to focus on beginning your career. I mean, there's no question starting a career, building and let's say a medical practice, or developing any kind of reality in any other profession. That takes full time. Then you have a young family. So in order, you know, or you're married. If you're young, you're going to have a young family. The pressures on the personal are very hard. And I think it's only reasonable to expect them to focus on that, at least initially, but not forever.
What's the secret to a long, happy, fulfilled life?
Just being yourself. Be yourself and enjoy what's around you.
Why do you think people struggle with being themselves?
I don't know. Maybe they're not happy in what they're doing.
How do you stay engaged, excited, happy for life? Like, you've got an amazing energy at 101 years old. How do you keep the joy and excitement every day?
I enjoy everything. I go to exercise every day. We all have good time.
How do people pick the right goal?
You need to ask Solomon that.
Talking to Gordon.
Well, I guess it's whatever you're comfortable with. They can't be pick them out of the air. You know, you have to give some thought to it and be assured that they sort of fit what you want to end up as. You know, it's not easy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people really struggle with knowing where to go and what to do.
I think so. And there's so much knowledge in the world. You know, all the knowledge in the world has been generated in about the last 10 years. I mean, think of that. That's amazing. And so there's a lot to learn. And technology is moving so fast. We'll all be replaced by AI robots and so on. You know, we have to be on top of things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the advice you've been given is great, and I think you're keep coming back to, like, know the goal, know the mission, and stay focused and get on top of it. I think a lot of people end up picking the wrong goal, the wrong mission, because they're supposed to do it, or somebody coerced them to do it, or they think society wants them to do it, as opposed to, like, figuring out the thing that's in their heart that they want to do. Mm-hmm. So do you have any guidance or wisdom of how to listen to your heart and find the thing that you're supposed to do?
First thing, don't be afraid of failure, because you can learn from that, and you can maybe adjust your goals or take a different path. But don't be too discouraged with failure, because that's how you'll eventually become a winner.
Do you have any relationship advice for people who are trying to find that?
To tell you the truth, I started going out with my husband when we were both in high school.
Okay.
And then we were married, we were both 21. And we were married for 65 years.
Wow. I just celebrated 12, so I've got a long way to go.
55 years. Not too bad.
What's the biggest lesson or gift you got from your husband?
My husband was a wonderful partner. He really was. I mean, first of all, he was a very talented person on his own. You see, when we graduated from medical school, I was the top one in my class, and he was second. And every one of the 6 years, except one, I stood first and he stood second. But the year we got married, because we got married halfway through medical school, he was first and I was second. He was a wonderful musician. He was a very good teacher and he was an excellent family doctor. He really was. I had a lot of confidence in things that I could share with him and that he did. He was really good as a family doctor. And he was very supportive. He would be very supportive of me. He'd read my manuscripts or wrote articles. He'd correct them. And I'd say, not just the commas and the periods, it's the content I want feedback on. So what I learned from him is what a wonderful partner can be.
What's the biggest lesson you learned from your mom and dad?
To care about other people. That's how I would sum up social activism. They were very sociable people also. But what I learned from them was what it means to be a progressive person in this society.
It seems that the care extended beyond, like most people, when you say care about other people, they just think about their friends and family and the people closest to them. But for you, it seems like care for the world, care for the country.
Not the whole world, but somewhere in between.
So you learned that from your parents of caring for?
Well, from my parents and their entire circle of friends. I mean, the type of people that they associated with were people who thought like they did.
What do you hope is the lesson that is most passed down through your generations?
About family?
About anything, from you to your kids to their kids. What do you hope gets passed down?
To my kids, yes, yeah. Well, they all have followed pretty well the same way of bringing up their family as they were brought up. And lots of times I get a thank you for that. And when they start going through things, but yeah, yes, right. Anyway, that's about all that's about all my life, and I'm glad to be here. Just my family home is just around the corner here. My son has the house, and which we bought in '61. I don't know how we ever bought it, but we did. And there again, we paid our bills first and made it work.
If someone's watching this video and they are trying to find their purpose, their happiness, what they should be doing with their life, what guidance would you give them?
You know, my dream is always, it's a dream every day. I got a picture of the wife and I always tell God, lift it up, and then have this miracle. Give me $250,000 trillion to help all over the world, plus $1 million to help somebody close by in Toronto, like, you know, plus $33 million from CNN to do all this on camera, plus get people that you make, if they want to pay you more money. I mean, you got enough money with that to give you money. And plus, everybody in Northtown be perfect. Just make a miracle that they're good. And then give me a job altogether to help the world.
You wish for that every day?
Every day. There's a picture when I'm watching TV every day.
What makes you want to help, the world instead of just yourself?
We're all the same. And there's so much waste of food. Then there's people that don't have anything to eat, nowhere to sleep, nothing to wear, And then there's people that got too much and they waste it. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be, we should all be the same, like I said.
What was your dream growing up?
That was my dream.
Did that come from your parents? What motivated you or inspired you to have such a big dream?
Mostly because I read about the immigrants in the Mediterranean, that they're escaping just to get a better life, and people in Mexico trying to get there in the United States, and things like that.
What is one book you think everyone should read?
Well, as I'm not a reader, but maybe the Bible. I have a friendship book, has all kinds of little writings in it for every day. My nephew gives it to me every Christmas. He gave it to my mom up to the time she passed, and that would be about maybe 50 years, 25, and I've been received since then. So that'd be about 50 years.
Wow, awesome.
Beautiful poem.
Do you have a favorite mentor from the Army that you learned a lot from?
Well, there were several, because there was a lot of very good leaders. Some not so good, but there were some very good leaders, which one would expect from the Army. One was a general by the name of Dextras, who was chief of the defense staff when he retired. He was very, very good with people, and he set a fine example.
So what did you learn from him?
That other word again, perseverance. Look after your men, and then they'll respond to you. That's the key message. Treat people right, and don't belittle subordinates ever. And that applies to all facets of life.
When did you decide that you had to be a voice and you had to stand up besides just being a practitioner?
Well, it sort of came upon not as a eureka experience, but first of all, both my parents were fairly active socially. And so I think that in my growing up, I was aware of social activism, of justice, and the impacts of poverty and things like that. That was in my background at one time. I became an advocate, really. It was an interesting experience. In 1975, it was declared the International Year of the Woman. And the Canadian government sponsored workshops across the country. And I was a neighbor of Betty Stevenson, who was at that time the first woman president of the Canadian Medical Association. And she was invited to do a workshop in Shelburne, Nova Scotia, but she couldn't go. She was too busy. So she asked me to go. And I did some preliminary readings. And that was the first time I became aware of this issue of women's health that I mentioned to you. It was a lovely weekend. I went out there. We did several workshops, and the women there were so grateful. And they said, how did you in Toronto know what our problems are here in Nova Scotia? And that was the eureka. And when I came back, I began to read and talk and attend conferences and begin to understand about women's health. Now, I wasn't the only one. There was a big movement in the United States and also in Canada. This is in the 70s, so you know that there was a lot of movement then in terms of women's rights and women's health and so on. So I wasn't unique.
Maybe not unique, but I mean, a lot of people just kind of accept the status quo or don't have the courage to voice up and don't want the criticism.
That's true. And I had many patients when I was in practice because I didn't go to McMaster till the end of the 70s. And they were acting out the fact that they had expectations. They were supposed to be the good wife, who took care of the house and took care of the kids, and kowtowed to the husband. And that's how women were expected to be in those days.
You seem to have done something that is, dare I say, impossible in terms of having your family come together. Everybody is loving each other, all sorts of different generations, and not having bickering or problems with cousins and whatever else. And so you must have done something right at the top.
Well, I guess it all stems back to a certain discipline. Discipline with a smile on your face. It has to be reasonable too. Yeah.
So what does that look like? Discipline with a smile on your face.
Well, discipline that's not backed up with anger, because that's not very productive. To be angry, and to be disciplining a child with anger. I don't know. I guess I must have had a way with talking to them.
In whatever you did, I think the biggest success, one man's opinion, is what they were then able to do with their kids as well.
Yes.
Like continued.
Yeah. Well, that it did continue, because, like I said, not too much now, because my children's children are older now, but when they were young, my daughter or son would say to me and my wife, "Oh yeah, so and so, I used the same tactics that you used on us when we were that age, and it works." So they did pass that on, whatever they learned from us, me and my wife, as far as bringing up children and having this discipline that they learned to accept. They had to be in by 11 o'clock. My daughter would come in 2 minutes after 11. I'd holler down, "Michelle, you're 2 minutes late." Okay. And that was it. It was not anger. It was just to let her know that I knew she was 2 minutes late. And that's things like that. Yeah. Is this important? Is this valuable to you?
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think a lot of parents struggle with.
A lot of parents are afraid of their children. They're afraid of them. That's why they don't discipline, because they're afraid to walk out. Well, if they want to walk out, tell them you'll help pack the suitcase. Have you noticed that? A lot of parents are afraid of their children. I know that through what my daughter tells me about Montessori children class, and the parents. The parents are involved a lot in Montessori kids with their children. They're afraid of their children.
Yeah, I think parents are afraid of a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're afraid of judgment. They're afraid of making the wrong mistakes. They're afraid of their kids being in therapy for the rest of their
Yes.
lives because of what
Yes.
you caused. They're afraid of all these
Yeah.
things.
Well, things are very difficult bringing up children these days, from what I can see on TV, with all the drugs and problems, and so many kids with mental problems. So it's very difficult bringing up children these days. It wasn't easy when my wife and I had young children. It wasn't easy, but it was a different kind of difficulty. It was making sure that they were hanging out with the right kids, getting food on the table, and a roof over their head and clothing. It's definitely different these days. But even in those days, we knew from friends of ours that they were afraid of their children. That's why they let them run.
What's the secret to a long, happy life?
Sense of humor, smiling. My daughter-in-law, who's very actively engaged in the insurance business and so on, decided one day to follow my example and smile at strangers. And she started to do that about, maybe a year or more, a couple of years now. And she has reported back to me what a difference it's made in her life. Just smiling at a stranger in the bus stop. I mean, sense of humor, irreverence.
What's something you used to think mattered a lot, but realized wasn't important as you got older?
Getting rich. When you're young, you always dream of getting to be a millionaire, and then what's the matter? It doesn't make any difference.
So what's more important?
Be happy, and I keep saying the same thing, is get along with people. It's very hard sometimes,
Why do you think we struggle with getting along with people?
because we're all the same. But sometimes religion divides us. We'll have to learn that thing, that we're all the same, and we can do something about it to help people in need.
What did you learn from each of your parents?
From home? I don't know, but I was brought up with 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and we had our little arguments, naturally, but nothing serious, and we all had good times. My mum, no matter who came, there's always room for one more, no matter who's at the table. And I guess I learned that from my mother. My dad passed away when I was quite young, so I didn't know too much. But I'm sure he was what I do remember, he was very strict.
What's one thing you believe young people today should focus more on?
They should focus less on the internet and their devices. You can learn a lot, and I agree, you have to stay abreast of technology. I mean, that's important. But I think there's a lot of time wasted on texting and gaming, and when they should be doing something more useful.
What should they be doing instead?
Maybe nurturing relationships like friends and family. And you can't do that texting. It's not the same.
Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self was, it took me a long time to begin to believe in myself. I had very accomplished parents. My father was very strong. I felt that next to them, I really didn't have much, period. And it took me until my 30s till I began to feel confident in myself. So I wish that I hadn't gone through that. I mean, I did very well in medical school, but I still didn't give myself the credit for that.
What changed in your 30s that led to the confidence?
I grew up.
Was there a life event or
No, I think what happened is after I graduated, I went into medical practice. I was a general practitioner together with my husband, and we did very well in our practice. So I think it was the fact that people began to believe in us and trust us and so on. And as I say, I grew up.
What's one book you think everybody should read?
Well, I guess the obvious one is the Bible, but some people wouldn't believe that. Anyway, I don't know, but in terms of authors, I was a great admirer of Churchill. He wrote a series of 6 or 8 books on the history of the war. His way with words was amazing. He had a great command of the language, and he used the right adjectives in the right place very effectively. He's a great writer, very knowledgeable.
What's the biggest lesson you learned from Churchill?
Perseverance, I think.
Never give up, never give in.
No, not at all.
What is something you wish people appreciated more?
Each other. You have to like each other. That's a problem sometimes.
How do we remember to do that when there's so much chaos happening in our lives?
Well, when you get to about 35 or so, you should be able to do that. When you're young, you know, it was always, you get some kid that's a little strange and everybody laughs at him, like, you know. But when you get to a certain age, you get away from that and appreciate everybody.
Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self?
It's the same thing, just be good to people, be nice and help people that are in need.
Is there a regret that you have that you learned a valuable lesson from?
I always get mad at God
Okay.
because, you know, when I was young, we learned that He could do everything. But then I realized that we're all God. We can do His work all together and help out.
Did something happen that helped you make that switch?
No, not really. But you look at you look what's happening in the world, like, you know, and it shouldn't be. We should all get together and help each other.
How do we do that? What would your guidance be?
It's like the trouble they're having in the States now with the immigrants, like, you know, what Trump is talking about to send them back, and even kids. We just have to share things so to make things easier for everybody. It's hard. Like, I read the news or read the news almost every day, and I watch what's happening in Europe. These immigrants are drowning almost every day, and they're being taken advantage of by some crook. They charge them a lot of money to bring them over to different places in Europe, and most of them drown. That shouldn't be. Some organization should help them.
What is something you wish people appreciated more?
I think they'd appreciate more the right to speak up when they have a thought or they want to advocate for something. I find that in many cases where I worked, and even here, people sometimes feel strongly about something, but they're afraid to speak up. And I think they cheat themselves that way.
Why are people afraid, do you think?
Oh, they don't want to be seen as stupid. They want to be seen as complainers. They want to be seen as dumb, whatever it is. But I spent my whole life as an advocate, so I can't sympathize with them.
What did you speak up for?
Well, I'm a physician. I was a family physician, and I became a professor at McMaster. And my chief interest, aside from the medicine itself, was to promote the careers of women physicians and also to promote women's health, because in the times when I went to medical school, women's health was having babies. That was all.
The work you did has had a big impact since when you started?
Yes, there was a lot of things about women's health that wasn't just related to reproduction, although that's a very important part of women's health. But the issues were that women were not being seen as separate from men. All the teaching, all the research, all the treatments were on the basis of what was found in males. So there was a lot of work to be done about women's health, and it's come a long way. The other thing about women physicians is when I went to medical school, there was a strict 10% quota of women students allowed in. Now, in almost all the Canadian medical schools, women outnumber men in the first medical year.
Wow. So it's 10% maximum were women.
Right.
Wow. You talk about books, so Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Is there a book that you think every young person should read today?
The Diary of Anne Frank.
What's the biggest takeaway for you from the Diary of Anne Frank?
Well, the way, the way people helped each other. You know, and they protected her, and things were good.
What does success mean to you, and have you had a successful life?
Well, it's very comforting. My success is based on my children, my family. That's why the family is very important. And that knowing that my family are all well-adjusted, good citizens, good education, that makes me feel very good. And I tell people that, yeah.
Awesome.
I feel very good in my retirement at 92, living here, which is only a block away from where I brought the children up in 1961 and bought the house down there. And yeah, I feel very good about it. But if I didn't do the discipline when it came to financing, my wife was very good at it. I didn't know very much, but when she died, I had to go to the bank. I didn't even know what to do. Anyway, that's another story. Financially, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the life I lived in those days. Yeah.
What advice do you have for people trying to find meaning and purpose?
Chart a path for you that makes sense for you, and focus and stay committed to that. Be prepared to learn as you go along in case there's obstacles or whatever. You may learn from that and may have to make a detour or whatever. But the ultimate goal, stay focused on that.
Do you have a story from your past, or did you struggle with that at all, or where you had to make a courageous choice?
Yeah, I did. I guess the most difficult time, I served in Gaza for 10 months with the UN peacekeeping. And during that time, there was no phone service, there was no internet, there was no such. You communicated with your wife, I did, by mail, and that took a long time to get a response and so on. Anyway, but I learned I knew she was pregnant when I left, so she was carrying our first child when I was over there. And she had her first depression while carrying this child, and was admitted to an institution in Guelph called Homewood Sanatorium. And that was difficult. And of course, I was a long way from home. I wasn't allowed to return home, except because I was the aide-de-camp to the commanding general. He was an Indian officer. He had to go back to India for some reason, so I really had nothing to do. So I arranged to get a flight home, and I did, and I saw my wife for a week, which was wonderful. But then I had to go back, and that was the most difficult decision I've ever made, was to go back. But she encouraged me to do that, because it was my career and my duty was over there. So I've always been so grateful that she understood that, even in her condition. But she got better and produced a wonderful child, and which I didn't see for 5 months. So such is life.
How would you define success, and do you think you've had a successful life?
I had a documentary made of me, and at the end of the documentary, they said, would you do anything different? And I said, I'm very satisfied with my life. There were tragedies in my life. There was great successes, lots of things. But overall, I am satisfied with my life.
We talked just before getting started about 2 books you think people should read.
Yeah, those right there. Yeah, those 2 books right there.
So
tells the whole story, where we came from and where we're going.
You wrote down, or you said, hold on, let me load it here. Collapse and Sapiens.
Yeah.
So take us into those books and why they're so important to you.
Well, the Sapiens book is, well, you read it, so it goes right back to when the planet was just floating around with all these bugs and things trying to find their way, and develops on into Sapiens, going through all the different little pockets of human-type people, or if you want to call them that, and goes on into Homo erectus. They got on their feet. And Homo sapiens, when Homo sapiens discovered that they didn't have to be gatherer-hunters anymore, if they planted food, this came 200,000 years ago, I guess, they could grow their own food. And this started around in Mesopotamia, places like that. They started farming. And when they had to farm, if the land was forested or full of brush and stuff, they cut it all down. They cut the trees down. And that was the beginning of the destruction of our planet. You cut trees down and you're in trouble. And that leads on into collapse, where all these little small civilizations sprung up. And, you know, they lived on an island. And when they didn't have any more trees to cut down, because they needed it to build houses and build fires and things, they just couldn't go to the next island because it was too far away, for one thing. They didn't have the transportation to get from one to the other. So the collapse is the collapse of these small civilizations that sprung up and disappeared. Like I was saying, Easter Island, there's quite a nice account of Easter Island on the book, Collapse. Yeah. So that's the kind of reading I do, form my own opinions about what I did and what I didn't. Well, and what I did, I did things and I didn't do things through life, naturally.
How do you deal with loss?
I cry. I cry a lot. I regret. When I lost my son, I lost my husband 7 years ago, and I still miss him terribly because we were both in practice together. When we left Toronto and went to teach at McMaster, we were both together. And we shared all our interests. And, you know, to this day, when I meet someone or something interesting happens, I want to share it with him. He's not here.
Any relationship advice for finding somebody who supports you and your goals and dreams?
A life's partner is the most serious choice you'll ever make in life. And I was fortunate I've made the right one. I've been married for 66 years 2 days ago. So
Wow, congrats.
Yeah.
And so how do people find that partner? Any advice?
No, I don't know. It's just a sense, you know, you got the right person. Yeah. But it's a commitment, you know, it's a lifelong commitment. And what I see today is people aren't as committed as I think they should be. Oh, well, you know, didn't work, try somebody else. I don't get that, you know. So anyway, it worked for me, so.
I just celebrated 12 years with my wife, so you're giving me something to aspire to,
Oh,
which is
yeah,
great.
well, good for you.
What advice do you have for people who are trying to find meaning and purpose?
The skills of planning, the skills of organizing, of consulting, of asking. I have an exercise I used to do with my students, and I've done on workshops. You are the company, and you have a board of directors. Who are you going to have sit at your board of directors table to help you run the corporation that is me? And for instance, you can put people that do good things. I would put my mother there as how not to do it. Her rudeness and her demeaning behavior with others was a beacon for me on how to live. She was a very forceful person in my life, and I swore to God I would never treat people, behave the way she did. And from that perspective, she's a very important member of the board of directors. And so that's an analogy that I find very helpful. Be willing to accept that you don't know, that you need help, and being willing to accept help when it's offered, or to ask when you know you need it. And here, you see a lot of persons who, I'm fine. Well, they want to be fine, but whether having fallen they are needs to be determined before they can be moved. But somebody, that's fine, I've got it. And people who do not know what persons with canes and walkers and so on do and do not need. What society needs right now is how to talk to seniors. Because you have gray hair doesn't mean you don't think. And the automatic assumption that because you're elderly, you can't do things, which in many cases is you can't. But then again, being overly helped is irritating. And yet the person means nothing more than to be helpful. But they don't know that helpful for some is irritating. And it's interesting to watch how people, they don't hear and they don't realize that we're all talking about something entirely different they're talking about. And that's sad. And so there's a heck of a lot of education that needs to take place because we're outnumbering you all very quickly.
Can you think of a decision you made earlier on that you're proud of, or a moment where you had to be courageous, where you were afraid to do something and you did it? Is there a story or decision you had to make?
I mean, life hasn't been easy, but whatever came up, I fought through it, tried to look on the bright side.
How do you remember to stay on the bright side?
Be positive. I love everybody around me. I don't know.
You have such a warm personality and a very kind energy. I think people would aspire to it. You know, to be 101 and still be full of life and happiness and positivity and energy,
Yeah.
I think is amazing.
And I feel so good. I have a friend now who just moved to Calgary, but we keep in touch. But we're 30 years. We've been friends, going out walking. Just keep going. Just be kind. Be kind to everybody. Because you treat people the way you'd like to be treated. And that's the way it works.
What's something you used to think mattered a lot, but realized wasn't important as you got older?
I guess what people think of you. You can overemphasize that and let it distract from your path that you've chosen for yourself. You have to be sure that what people are thinking or saying is truly meaningful and not there's no ulterior motives there.
And how do you discern the difference?
That's experience, I think, life experience, and know the source.
Looking back, what advice would you give your younger self?
Keep open to change, plan, establish some priorities that you would then figure out how to go about, or learning how to go about fixing some things that I wouldn't know how to do. And I don't mean mechanical. Relationships, how to deal with, I mean, as a principal, I was dealing with teachers who were incompetent or unkind or what have you, and how to help them be better, because you can't fire them. So at the very least, a lot of my effort went into curriculum development and staff development. My partner in this business, we had a company. We did resume writing and interviewing techniques and helping, and I learned a lot about helping people through that kind of thing. So for learning, if I had things to do over again, I wish I could bring with me or foresee the gifts, the talents, the skills that I have now, which would have been so useful if I'd known then.
What's the most important gift or talent that you would have loved to have earlier?
Less innocence. Other people aren't always as nice as you think they are or would like them to be. But it really irritated me when people told me that other people weren't. Did you not know that he, whatever? I didn't need to know that, and I regret that. So whatever it would take to be open to the new, with the skill, I don't know that I even have it now, the skill to recognize it's not all as it appears, that the person, he's not lying, but he or she is not telling the truth. And I go along with my glass half full and assume the best. And on a couple of occasions, nothing in particular strikes me. It would have been helpful if I'd realized that before I got into whatever it might have been. I'm talking in terms of my work with staff and students and so on.
If you think about this video will live a long time and your great grandkids are getting to see, Peggy for the first time, what would you want to tell them, or what would you want them to know?
That I love them all. That's all. If we don't see one another, I still love you. Their parents, tell them what we did. Had a good time.
What is something you wish people appreciated more?
Probably what they have, and they don't realize, what they really have. You hear a lot of politicians complaining about the country is broken. I won't mention any names, but we're pretty lucky, and most people should be satisfied with what they have. Maybe it's a little envy of other people or whatever, but I think we underappreciate what we have.
What do you most appreciate of what you have?
Well, in terms of family, friends, those relationships are really important in life, I think. And maybe they don't put those in the asset column enough.
What's the key to your relationships, to your marriage relationship? When I asked you about success, you said along, marriage, to the friendships you had. Somebody wants to build their relationships. What advice would you give them?
I don't think I was the nicest guy. I used to play around a little bit. But you learn that you have to be nice to each other. That's the only way you can survive. You can't fool around and make a marriage, and you have to help each other so much and trust each other. I was married twice. The first marriage, I had two good wives. And, it was two pretty good marriages. My second wife, she was a good person, and she helped me a lot. I was a very shy person, and she helped me in a lot of ways, and it made me a better person.
For people watching, how do they find that person that makes them a better person?
It's a game. It's a chance. Some people fall in love for different reasons, and some people fall in love because the person sort of is good to them, and you're good to them as well. It works out, but there's so many different things that can happen. Nothing works perfect,
What did you do for work when you're in your working days?
I worked as a stenographer. I worked in an office for 42 years. After the war, Second World War, I went to Shaw's Business School, took a course. I got a job. I stayed at that job for 42 years. I could run the office. I'm in touch with a gentleman in Prince Edward Island that used to work for the company. Once in a while, I'll phone him, see how things are going. He says he doesn't know anybody but me that worked there, like keep in touch. So I had a good job. And when I retired, they said, "Why are you retiring?" I said, "Well, it's about time. I was 65 and just enjoy myself. Life has been good. It ups and downs, but you make it."
How would you define success, and do you feel that you've had success?
I think you can define it as who you've become as a person rather than monetary assets or, I mean, that's a good indication that but if you're happy within yourself as a person, that you're a good person, that's success to me.
And have you hit that for yourself?
Yes.
How do you want to be remembered?
I should be remembered as a person who is an activist in my profession, as I described, but on the other hand, as a very loving mother and grandmother, because I'm very lucky. My 2 surviving sons are wonderful to me, and I have 7 grandchildren, and they all get along well with one another, and I love them and they love me, so that's a wonderful thing to be proud of.
I think I'll have to leave that up to the people who go to my funeral. I don't know. I have a good association with my family. They all love me. Pop. I'm Pop.
I guess it's more, when your grandkids are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, telling their grandkids, about Pops.
Yeah.
What do you hope that they say?
Well, I'm sure if they still have thoughts about what they say now, they will say then. We can all get into the same room for a party, Christmas, whatever, and have a good time, and there's no bickering, no, oh, I don't talk to this cousin, I don't talk to that cousin. They all, yeah.
So how do you manage that?
Well, there was discipline when my kids were young. There was discipline. And they tried, yeah, they were normal children. They tried to tell me what life is all about. I was lucky. I was lucky. I got away with it. I told them, I let them know they were wrong. And I got away with it, yes, yeah. Because none of them packed up and left home.
Kindly. With humor. And with any luck at all, a little bit of gratitude. And bon voyage.
As a fair person, I had something, though, that I didn't bring up. That just really reminds me all the time. I was driving a truck, and I lost the drive shaft. And coming down a hill, and there were kids crossing the road, people crossing the street there, and I couldn't stop the truck. I was protected by somebody then. Somebody looked after me because it was so obvious that I was going to hit somebody, but I didn't, thanks to God or my guardian angel, if there's such a thing. And every day I try to stay away from that road, and because it reminded me, it could have changed my whole life. I was about 24, 25 then. I was very, very lucky.
Well, I hope I'm remembered as a good person, as a good parent, as a good husband, and as a good friend.
I'm a lovable person. I love people. I'll do anything for them if I could. And I hope my family, I'm sure, remembers the things we did. As children, I looked after them part-time, and we always had a good time. Lots of laughs.
To see another amazing interview in our Elder series and get more life advice and wisdom, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Well, we've got Claire with us here today, 82 years old, looking amazing.
Oh, well, thank you.
And she's going to share some life advice and wisdom with some questions.
Sure,
You ready to go?
I am.
First question.